Greetings and welcome to the Leader Show, courtesy of the Evangelical Alliance of Kenya in partnership with Catalid. Today, I'll be your host, Lugalia Kelvin. This is one of those shows that we talk about leadership and how does it affect our society. And for us today, our topic is youth unemployment distress. And to just help us break down this topic, we have a guest in the house. I'll just allow him to introduce himself, tell us who you are and where you're coming from.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. Pleasure to be here.
Yes.
My name is Alex Kamanga Mwangi. I represent, or rather, I'm privileged to have co-founded, and I currently lead a company known as Fundis App Limited here in Kenya, in the US known as Fundis Inc. And essentially what we do, we think about what you just called as youth unemployment distress.
Yes.
That is the mandate we focus on. So essentially what we've been doing, we have been thinking about how do we create dignified work? How do we create work that young people find to be meaningful? And of course, satisfactory in all facets that you can think about. And of course, I think we'll be talking a bit more about that during the show.
Okay,
yes.
Karibu sana.
Yes. Thank you.
Maybe just to start with the topic, when you say youth unemployment distress, what is an employment distress? What does it mean?
So youth unemployment distress, of course, as you have rightly put it, there are three elements there. So there is the youth, and then there is unemployment, and then there is the distress part. So essentially, when we talk about the youth unemployment distress, it's a broad term, but we could be referring to one of the following. Number one, we could be talking about young people who are skilled, who are willing to work, but they don't have the opportunity to engage in meaningful work. We could be talking about young people who have the skills, who are ready to work, who are engaged in some form of work, but they could be termed as unsatisfied with the work that they do, or we could say they are underemployed. And then there's a third category we could talk about, young people who are not in employment, they are not in entrepreneurship, they are not in any form of training, but given an opportunity to engage in something meaningful, they would be willing to take it. So when you combine all those three things, then we end up having with what now you would call youth unemployment distress, primarily affecting the young people.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
You've broken them quite well. Yeah. And what will be, because when you're talking about unemployment, of course, there's something that has caused that unemployment. And what are the root causes of unemployment, especially here in Kenya? I understand it is a global issue.
Yes.
But especially now here in
Yes.
Kenya, what are the root causes of unemployment?
So, again, this is not, I guess, a new conversation at all. I think I was reading a book quite recently written by a guy known as S.M. Wamai. So he wrote that book in, I believe, 1984, and he was talking about the coming Jua Kali boom. I think that year in his book, he captures at the forward of that book that year, there was going to be 16,000 graduates in that year. Of course, we are way many times over that right now in terms of the number of graduates that are coming out every year. So there are a couple of reasons, a couple of causal effects that combined end up having what now we have as youth unemployment. Of course, number one, when you think about educational transitions, and transitions I mean, for instance, at the university level, there is what you would be calling a cutoff. Somebody who did not achieve the right grade to proceed maybe to university. But when I'm talking about now transitions, generally, I'm talking all the way from the K-12, the lower levels of education. In our case, if you move all the way from nursery, the kindergarten, you come to primary, you come to secondary, you go to tertiary, all that. Number one is that transitions over the years have been growing, meaning more number of kids, more number of young people have progressed in the transitions. But the opportunities have not been keeping up with that. So remember, when we are talking about now youth who are to be engaged in employment, whether it's entrepreneurship, employment, or whatever other sort of self-employment you think about, it's the same young people who came through all these levels. So you remember during the Mwai Kibaki regime, we had the creation of free primary education. So as a right that children need to have, education is one of those. So what has happened over the years? A lot of young people have progressed in the transitions. More people are transiting from the nursery level to primary level, more from primary to tertiary to secondary, more from secondary to, and opportunities are not keeping up with that. That's the first reason why we have a lot of young people who are in this particular distress. Number two, of course, is when you think about employment opportunities, essentially that opportunity has to be created by somebody, whether it's government, whether it's the private sector. As the economy is growing, opportunities for engagement also grow. So when opportunities are not being created at the exact same fast rate as the number of young people, because again, we have what you'd call a population explosion over time. More people are out there. So you find there's going to be mismatch. To give you a good example, today in Kenya, in sub-Saharan Africa, and by extension the larger continent, so for every 4 young people who are entering the labor market, only 1 formal sector job is being created. So when you talk about the Kadogo economy, the hustler nation, essentially we are talking about people who, although I have the degree, although I have the diploma, although I have the certificate, there is no opportunity for me to be engaged with what I was trained in. So there's a combination of so many things, including young people just being selective. I have a rough idea on, all right, so I did a law degree, or I did a medical, whatever degree. I come into the market, I don't find opportunities in line with what I was training, and I don't want to take on anything else. So there's a whole sorts of combinations of why we have that unemployment distress, and we will unpack one after the other as we keep talking. Yes.
Yeah. That I like how you are even breaking the numbers and in terms of how many people are coming out of school, in relation to how many people are getting employed. And just a question on what is the government doing about it? What is the government doing about people who are getting skills, people who are getting educated, they come out with diplomas, degrees. These are people that can really help in our society. So what is the government doing about it?
A lot. And especially despite everything that's ongoing. So I've been privileged to be in the space that I am with the Fundis app from the year 2016. So I have had the privilege to look at a lot of efforts, to look at a lot of things that have been created out there. So number one, if you go all the way back from the campaign season, you remember there were a lot of promises on jobs for young people, engaging young people. And of course, the government has done what I would say, in my view, because I have that privilege to be on a front row view to see what some of the initiatives that the government, this current government, has had in place. But of course, be as it may, with all the efforts, with all the initiatives, still there's almost like a feeling like we are on a rocking horse. A lot of activity, but no progress.
Yes, there's nothing to show.
But nothing to show. But of course, I'll tell you what. So I've been privileged to be a mentor. For example, if I was to tell you about what the government has been pushing together with other private sector partners, the Ajira Digital Program.
Okay.
And they have a target to create several millions number of jobs from online work. So the government, you'd see this government has been very, very, very keen on digitalization. A lot of services going digital. You have seen the last 2 weeks, I guess the president was being criticized over the jobs that are being created abroad and they are not being created locally.
Yeah.
But the truth is the government is really, really, really doing a lot. Number one, if you think about digital work and the number of opportunities that can be created from digital work, it's a lot. And you can think about digital work in 3 categories. So there is the first category of work that needs what you would call advanced skill. So let's say guys who are involved in programming, coding, all those kinds of things. That's work that the market, the clientele, the employers, the customers may be in another part of the world. But young people who have the skills locally can be able to tap into those opportunities. The second category that the government is pushing on is what you'd say is work that needs almost mid-level skills. So you're thinking about things like translation services, transcription services. Again, we have a lot of young people. Our education system is actually not that badly off compared to the rest of the continent. So you have guys who can do translation, different languages, all that. Then there's the last category, which is where we are involved with Fundizap and where we even have partnered with the government as well, is what you would call digitally enabled work. So digitally enabled work, think about the Uber drivers, think about the guys who deliver for Glovo, the bike guys, think about all the people who are involved as hosts on platforms like Airbnb. And of course, there's also a conversation to go after them from a taxation perspective. But ideally, the government is putting a lot of infrastructure, a lot of programs, a lot of initiatives from a perspective of even building hubs, digital hubs where you have all the necessary tech equipment from perspective of whether it's laptops, access to internet. So the government is doing a lot. But of course, it's not completely doable without the role of the private sector.
Yeah.
So it needs all hands on board because ultimately, what is the money that the government uses? Primarily comes from taxes. Taxes come from me and you. It comes from the private sectors, the people who are in business. So spurring growth in the private sector ultimately has a bottom line on taxes and ultimately has an effect on what the government could potentially do. For instance, when we rejected the finance bill, you had the conversation, of course, the government now telling you, all right, we're going to have to cut down on what we would have done to employ more teachers, what we would have done on the medical scenario. So again, there's a lot of that. The government is doing a lot, but we need to accelerate the pace of what is being done, and that's where the private sector comes in as well.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
And so that is what the government is doing.
Yes.
And what will be the role of a citizen, of a youth, in tapping into what the government is doing, so that the government is not just there creating opportunities, but the young people are not going for these opportunities. So what will be the role of the young people or of the youth, of the unemployed Kenyans?
And I say, of course, there's usually the saying that, you can take the camel to the water point, or you can take the whatever animal you may use in that phrase to the water point. But ultimately, you can't force them to do the drinking.
Yeah.
So there is a lot from a perspective of me and you and every other young person out there from a perspective of what we need to do. We have to take these opportunities with both hands. We have to go for these opportunities. Number one for me is preparation. There's a saying that it's preparation that determines how well you do in any area of life. Preparation in this case, I mean, for a lot of young people, no matter the opportunities that are being created, if we are not prepared for them, those opportunities will not do us any good. Think of it, for instance, all these opportunities that are being created, let's say, for working abroad. If you don't have a passport, let's say, as an example, no matter how many of those opportunities come, you will never be qualified to even apply for them.
Yes.
If you think about opportunity, let's say, in the digital space that are being created, if we don't have the digital literacy skills that are relevant and needed for that, those opportunities will never get to us. And I now have to actually speak on this from a perspective of outside the education curriculum perspective. There's a lot of what I would say is self-directed kind of education. It's self-directed kind of learning and relearning. Give you an example. So when I went to the Technical University of Kenya, I studied legal studies. So essentially, I should be very much heavily involved in the legal space. And of course, I did practice for some time. But the last 7 years, I've been involved in a completely different new area that I was not prepared for. The amount of self-directed learning I have to do every single day, it's dedicated man hours that need to go to that. And this is applicable for every other young person out there. I'll give you an example that I saw quite recently. So I was moving from one part of the city to another, and you know the way you want to really get there quickly, I held down a Nduthi guy, a boda guy. And when he dropped me, he gave me a business card. And when I looked at the business card, it had his name, it had his phone number, and it had his different services that we can engage him on. One of those was errands. That if you want to send somebody for groceries, when you want to send somebody to deliver something, when you want to send somebody, yeah, I can be your go-to guy. And I thought about it. This is not your typical average Nduthi young man.
Yeah.
He has a business card.
Yes.
What am I looking at that? So whereas there may be many other people who are involved in the same border business, he has branded himself a little different. And by the conversation that we had, I could tell this is a learned person. His command of the language, his fluency and all that, I could tell this is somebody who's actually exposed. I looked at it and I said, all right, this person now has redefined a career for himself. He's a professional career, professional logistics person. He has a business card. And I have that business card today. When I need to send somebody quickly on an urgent errand and I want it done at a personal level, that's the guy I call. But he has, let me also add, while I was having the conversation with him, I actually learned that even if it's things like you want to go and bank a check, he actually knows how to do that. You give him those details, he's going to go be able to bank the check for you and deliver back the slip. So I was like, okay, when I'm talking about self-directed kind of knowledge, whether you went to Harvard or Harvard University, whichever it is, as soon as you graduate, nobody cares where you went to school. What you are able to deliver, that's the crux of the matter. That's the gist of the conversation. So self-directed kind of learning is as soon as you graduated that last day, self-directed learning started on that day. And there are so many people that from when they got that, they were conferred with that degree, with that diploma, with that certificate. Learning stopped ultimately from that day. So in the current season we are in, there needs to be a lot of self-directed kind of learning. People need to identify, all right, where do I want to go in the next 3 months? Where do I want to be in the next 6 months? And put yourself out there to acquire the relevant skills that you need to get there. So that's how I would look at that from a perspective of what do I need to do, because it's personal responsibility as well. Yeah.
That is quite interesting. And someone will ask, why wouldn't the government or now the schools,
Yes,
here the universities, try and bring that earlier in someone's life?
Yes.
So that I don't go to school to do maybe, let's say, education, and then I come out there.
Yeah.
The government is offering me jobs to do with tech.
Tech.
So, and yet my background
Yes.
is in education.
Yes.
I should be going to class to teach and
Yes.
such.
Yes.
So how do you even bring the two together and ensure that we don't go to school and then come outside here and then we realize we need to learn new skills so that we are able to even be part of this community?
That's a very, 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 very good question. I'll give you a good example with myself. When I made the decision to go and do legal studies, it was based on a series I had watched. So back then, there's a series that was known as The Practice.
Yes.
And watching The Practice, I thought this is actually how the legal system in Kenya equally works. So at that point, I don't know any legal practitioner in my life. And think about it. When young people are making careers today, somebody wants to be a surgeon, somebody wants to be a pilot. How many pilots do they know? How many pilots have they interacted with? If somebody wants to become a medical practitioner, is this an area they know somebody? Do they even know whether they have the temperament or even the attitude to actually thrive in that particular area? I have a statement that I always say that exposure is the price we have to pay for greatness. Unfortunately, exposure is not one of the things that's going into the space. And I think this is one of the key areas we need to focus on. Internship, attachments, exposure opportunities can not just be a requirement or a unit for somebody to actually graduate. We have to go a little bit more than that. How I see it, and that's one of the things that we are working on with Fundis. So we have started what we are calling the Fundis clubs. And these Fundis clubs are actually dedicated for vocational training centers, polytechnics, technical training institutes, an area that is not part of the universities that there's been a lot of focus on, but a tertiary bit of higher education that has not had those opportunities. We need to invest in exposure opportunities. I've been doing a silent survey in the last 3, 4, 5 years. When we're engaging with training institutions, tertiary training institutions, higher education institutions, I'm always keen to understand, do they have an idea how well the graduates they churn out into the market, how they are doing? 4 in 5 have no idea, and I could tell they are not interested. And where we have seen interest is only in the private sector institutions.
Yeah.
There is a kind of an alignment around how they bring in new students into their programs, and then being deliberate to observe what's going out there. I'll give you a good example. So on our platform, there's a time we wanted to onboard plumbers and welders. And we reached out to the Eastlands College of Technology. For the class that had graduated that year, we could not find a single student who was not engaged. That's a good program. If we were able to do that with a lot of many other institutions, that there is a deliberate involvement in the people who run institutions to understand how well do our graduates do out there. So from what you have asked me, we have to put a bit more resources on exposure. I guess if you talk to a lot of many young people, they will tell you they paid for something that's called for attachment.
Yes.
But the institution did not provide that particular attachment. Why? Obviously, number one is there is a rift between the world of work, the employers, and the trainers. And of course, the government has been doing a lot to bridge that gap. Bridging the gap from a perspective of, let's align training with what we, the employers, are looking for. For instance, if I want to hire an electrician out there, the electrician that Kenya Power and Lighting Company may need may be different from what KenGen needs, may be different from what, let me take an example of a brand like Sun King that is involved in solar or Tsunami Solar. It's an electrician, yes, it's a solar technician, yes, but they may have very, very, very different skills. So we could work backwards to inform training. So number one, exposure has to go into this space. Institutions will have to get very, very, very deliberate around. Let's see how well we can talk about transition from the number of people who graduated, number of people who are involved in gainful work, a number of people who could come back to the institution to speak to those who are now taking those particular courses. So exposure is going to be key. It's what needs to go into that space for even to fine-tune our mindset. We've been trying to think about how could we leverage on all these long holidays that high schools have. Is there a way, let's say, if I come home this month, like now I think they're going to be closing around in 2 weeks' time. These 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and somebody is at home, how would we allow you to visit a law firm for a week, to visit a hospital another week, to visit a business owner another 1 week? In a way that it's very, very, very well structured. That by the time I'm going back to school, I know for sure, I have a keen interest in what I saw in the process of working with a business person, or in the course of working with an educator or in a school. So exposure cannot be taken out of that equation. And that takes trainers, it takes curriculum developers, it takes policy makers, it makes, even the institutions themselves, they have to get involved.
Wow. I would like us to take a break so that we come back and just pick up from that answer of exposure. I'd like us to take a break, and we'll be going for a break. This is the Leader Show, courtesy of the Evangelical Alliance of Kenya. See you on the other end.
I've actually been trying to find a balance. It's been really tough and hectic, but everyone says once you get a hang of it, it becomes better, and I don't know, but I'm hoping to find a balance soon because it's really been hectic. But you've been in the job industry for a long time, so I think you would know better. Sindio?
What time is it? I need to catch up on Leadership Forum. Do they have a radio here? Never mind. I brought my own.
No way. You can't be serious. Wait, why do you have a radio and you can just catch up with the shows on Hope FM podcast?
Really? Even Meet of the World?
I mean, you can find them on whatever platform, name it. AfriPods, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, you name it.
But I'm not subscribed on any of them.
So no worries. You can just check out the latest episodes on hopemediakenya.org.
You can now listen to select Hope FM programs on your favorite podcast streaming platform or directly on our website, www.hopemediakenya.org. Listen and live.
Hope TV presents News on the Go every day at 4 p.m. for all the breaking news and news making headlines. Hope TV, look and live.
Welcome back. This is the Leader Show, and we are just talking about, we were raising a very important point on exposure and the role of young people. And so how do we even educate young people to understand that it is very important for them to be exposed in these fields,
Yes.
even as they study, when they are choosing their careers, when they are still in high school and thinking of, I will want to be a doctor, I will want to be a nurse, I want to be a businessman, I will want to be whatever career it is. How do we start teaching them on the issue of exposure?
Right. So secondly, secondly, now following up to exposure, I think the next thing we deliberately need to do is to take the role of career counselors, career coaches, career guiders very, 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 very seriously. It cannot be a by the way part of the infrastructure. Career coaches, as early as possible, are very, 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 very essential. And I think this is somewhere whether in the nationally funded outfits and also privately funded education setouts, this has to be taken quite keenly, because Dr. Miles Munro used to say that when purpose is not known, abuse is inevitable. If we don't identify this conversation very, very, very early, and I think, because for me, the world of work has a lot also to do with the personal purpose perspective. If you look back from early childhood, there were things that you and I could have excelled in almost seemingly effortlessly. That there are people who just stand and they are able to speak to crowds. For instance, if there was a guest and then we are thinking about who will do the vote of thanks on behalf of the school, on behalf of the class, there was always somebody who would jump out of mind, and it wasn't a hassle for them. Or if we are thinking on who is gonna go represent us for a math contest, or a languages or debate or whatever you may think, including all the way to sports, as early as possible. And I love, and that's why I'm a huge proponent of the CBC and the competency based education training methodology, is let's major on your majors and stop focusing on your minors. If we already know somebody is likely to do very well from very early stage on certain lines, we need to start doubling down on those things as early as possible. So I think we need to deliberately invest in career coaches, career counselors, career guidance, whether on a full-time basis or even as finding budgets in institutions where they visit, and we do a very, very, very deliberate work around even providing reports to parents. If you check on our platform, the Fundis app, inside that app, whenever an artisan is joining, one of the critical things we have done is we want to provide an assessment. We kind of want to quickly base where are you in terms of this particular skill in question, whether it's plumbing or carpentry or appliance fixing, whatever it is. Let's get an attitude, knowledge, competency, skills gap report very, very, very early, so that then we know where we are focusing. We need something similar across all levels of training. And then we need now to support people to move to the next stage, which brings to the next part. So besides exposure, besides career coaches, I think we need to redefine careers. Let me give you a good example. If I am a nanny and I have worked the last 20 years for different families, are there skills I'm likely to have acquired over that 20 years period of time? Yes. Are they authenticatable from a perspective of a resume or career brief, the way you and I would present a CV somewhere? If I have handled 30 families, 120 kids over the last 20 years, I obviously know something, a thing or two. But when I want to get employed by the next family as a nanny, what do I present to them to show I actually have competency and knowledge and learning and experience in these areas? And 85% of workers in this country are not in the formal sector. They are in the informal sector, in the jua kali sector. We have given it a fancy name of late. We are calling it gig work, the gig economy. But what is a gig? In my research, a gig in Kiswahili is kibarua.
Yeah.
Kibarua is not really new. As far as we can go back, the people who would go to till the land, cultivate somebody's land, be given 100 bob end of the day and a cup of uji or lunch, that was kibarua. The thing that has now changed is the technology, digital technologies element has come into that kibarua, and that's why we are talking about gig work. So when we are talking about gig work now, we are talking about the person who is an accountant by day and is on Bolt or Uber in the evening to make some extra money. The person who is a teacher by day and weekend is a weddings events planner. So I think we need to redefine careers. The traditional careers model, the way we knew it, we have to throw that playbook out. We need now to say, I'll give you a good example. On our platform, we have painters and carpenters who have low degrees. The question becomes, what would make somebody ditch legal practice and they passed with distinction and choose to become a painter? And when you look at their level of income, it starts making sense. Averagely, we did so we were trying to roll out an insurance cover for artisans quite recently. And we engaged a partner and we did a survey. And we found an average of about 67 artisans that we engaged were earning a mid-range of 35,000 to 45,000. Even where I lastly left practice, there were not so many guys who had joined the bar who were being paid that much. We need to redefine careers. For example, I've been a very, very, very huge proponent. When somebody asks me what I do, I actually say I'm an entrepreneur. And I approach that very, 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 very consciously. I look at it as a profession. My business cards reads, I'm a professional entrepreneur. I build businesses for a living, just like a lawyer practices the legal practice, or a medical doctor practices medicine. We need to look at redefining careers. I have a very good guy who I've known for the last 10 years, who is now a hype man. And I've looked at the amount of training and growth that guy has done over the last 6-7 years. I can see the growth. That person needs to give you their business cards and it reads, I'm a hype man. I do corporate, or whether it's weddings or that. And there's actually trainings people are doing for that. So from a private sector perspective, right now I'm part of what is known as the MasterCard Foundation EdTech Fellowship, where innovators who are fusing education and technology are being accelerated and supported to be able to provide solutions to more people, more teachers, more students, more institutions. I see an opportunity we have to redefine careers the way they were always looking like, create new careers. Think about, how do we even work on career progression? I'll give you a good example. If 85% of the workforce today is in the informal sector, what does career growth look like? What does even retirement and planning for retirement looks like? I'll give you a good example. If I've been a welder all my life, what is my retirement strategy? In our perspective, if 85% of the workforce is in the informal sector, if you look at the economy the last 10 years, when we are talking about new jobs created every year, those jobs are not coming from the formal sector. In fact, the formal sector, in my view, is shrinking from COVID time.
Yeah.
And then there is the bit where now young people no longer work to clock the hours and to get a paycheck. I've been privileged to be an employer of Gen Zs the last 5 years or so. If your workplace lacks meaning, somebody will resign over WhatsApp. It's not that of a big deal. I don't really need that job. That by default is what is also contributing to that youth unemployment distress, because the moment we have so much choice, somebody in Kenya will be jobless for 5 years and never sleep hungry. Where do they get the money to eat?
Yeah.
How do they get money to buy bundles and all that? So I'm looking at, we need, besides exposure, besides career guidance, we need to redefine careers. And then number 4, we need to leverage on technology. And that's what Fundis is doing. We need to leverage on Fundis. Essentially how Fundis came about in 2016. We would visit construction sites. So you find yourself in one part of the city. Let's say you are in the Kiambu County side, you are in Wetavie, Kenyatta Road, those side. You find a fundi who came all the way from Kawangware and Kangemi. Then you come in Lavington and Kileleshwa on a construction site. You find a technician, an artisan who came from Juja, Gashororo. So you are thinking about how many projects along the way did they live. So the idea about Fundis App, as the name would suggest, we were thinking about how do we build something that fills in that fragmentation, that gap. So the goal was, how do we enable artisans to start knowing this is where there is a project, this is where a foreman needs somebody, this is where a contractor needs somebody. But equally, if you are a site manager and you are looking to hire 10 steel fixers and you have 100 guys at the gate, each claiming to be a steel fixer, what mechanism do you use to decide that of these 100 people, these are the 10? They are not coming with a resume. In this country, one of the things I've learned, one of the things young people are really good at ni kujiamini. I'll never tell you I don't know how to do that thing. So I've watched in disbelief even for technicians who fix laptops. Yeah, you leave your laptop or your gadget at the service center. The guy is immediately going on YouTube to actually even see how to unscrew the thing. So you get that kujiamini is really, really, really good. That self-belief that young people have. But then to bridge that particular gap from thinking about how do we leverage on technology. So right now we are pushing and working and expanding the platform to take on more career types. So essentially when we started with Fundis App, we were focused on these artisans. But then we switched the word fundi. A fundi is an expert at something. It doesn't have necessarily to be a handyman, an artisanal type of worker in something. So we are now moving to more career types. We are thinking, what would LinkedIn look like for informal sector workers? You and me that have some formal training can be able to leverage on LinkedIn. But we need to build something that can serve the 85% of the people. So that if I'm sending you a nanny, if I'm sending you a cleaner, if I'm sending you a plumber, if I'm sending you a medical appliances fixer, you get a perspective of where has this person been before? What have they done? What have they excelled at? What have other customers said about them? And they can leverage on that same profile to market themselves on their private gigs. So you find we are working on, let's redefine what career identity looks like. But most importantly, we are trying to demystify that a lot of what young people are calling side hustles, we need to stop calling them side hustles. The day Fundis paid rent in 2017, 2018, the first time, it opened my eyes to think, wait. If I double down on this thing, I can actually bring in more people. And we've created more jobs. I think we are supporting over 5,000 artisans on Fundis App right now. The idea is now we are moving to more counties. That's where the private sector comes in. We need to leverage on technology, because technology is not the solution, but technology can be seen as the means to the solutions. It's a pathway, it's an intervention. We can leverage on that. Think about now we have a new category of workers in this country we are calling platform workers. The day Uber drivers strike, you and I know. The day all these, and that's why you will talk, when you talk to Uber drivers, they'll tell you they have a preference of a little cab or any other for certain reasons based on them. That is now a career path. I'm an Uber driver. I'm a Fundis technician. I'm an Airbnb host. All these areas, this is us now leveraging on technology. So those are the 4 things I would see as very, 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 very crucial for the government, policymaker, private sector players, innovators, all those kinds of people. And the church as well.
And the church as well.
Yeah.
And speaking of the church as well, what will be the role of the church? Because we have a lot of people who attend churches every Sunday, maybe a midweek service.
Yes.
What will be the role of the church in just helping the young people have some sense of purpose in their lives, especially for the unemployed people? Not even the church, also the religious organizations that are not necessarily places of worship, but they are religious in
their approach.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what will be their role?
A lot. There's a scripture that says that, upon Mount Zion there shall be, deliverance, and the house of Jacob shall possess their possessions. In fact, I think in these days that we are in, the church needs to be a benchmark in terms of mobilizing. And I also rightfully say so because even during the whole Maandamano beats, churches were on the list of people to be visited, kusalimiwa. They have a very, 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 very critical role. So I see, number one, the role that I self-describe as a faith-driven entrepreneur. Faith-driven entrepreneur, what that means is I see myself to have a very, 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 very high calling. This high calling is to be a co-creator with God. Essentially, God is a God of solutions. Essentially, God is a God of interventions. If you look at Exodus chapter 3 from, I believe, verse number 27, when God heard the cry of the Israelites by reason of affliction, by reason of their taskmaster. The first thing when he's talking to Moses, he says is that I have heard. But equally, he tells Moses, I have seen. But thirdly, and most importantly, after he has heard and seen, he responds. And that's what he tells Moses, and I'm sending you. The church needs to take that call very, very, very seriously. I see the church as a solutions provider. The church needs to be alive, and faith-driven entrepreneurs and religious organized entities need to be alive to the fact that the call to respond is the call to provide solutions. It's not the call to increase in numbers, although the numbers are very, 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 very critical. It's a call to, if let's say I am in a setting where I'm very, 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 very conscious about the need for jobs, how do we start creating job boards that new converts, new visitors are able to also know, if I'm a member of this place, I have a new opportunity in our workplace, I actually have a way to channel it to the leadership, and that can go to the various people that we have. If we have in areas that people are facing one challenge or the other, how do we respond? I think what entrepreneurs are really good at is to identify needs and solve them. We need to take an entrepreneurial approach in reaching needs, in meeting hearts, in providing solutions. That goes from churches, it goes from religious organizations, it goes from faith-driven innovators, faith-driven entrepreneurs. Wherever you find yourself in, the call to co-create is a call to provide solutions. And I believe once we provide solutions, at the very, 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 very end, reaching out to the lost becomes way, 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 way easier. That's how I would see as a responsibility.
The responsibility
Yes.
of the church.
Yes.
And looking at young people, we get affected by unemployment in one way or the other.
Yes.
What are some of the ways that you'll say that the young people are affected by the issue of unemployment?
A lot. It has been practically proven that without a regular decent income, it's practically impossible to come out of poverty. Without a regular decent income. In fact, so the African Development Bank, in its strategy for jobs for youth in Africa, estimates that by the year 2050, the youth population will have doubled to somewhere around 830 million across the continent. The MasterCard Foundation also has the Young Africa Works strategy that has again targeted at creating dignified, meaningful work for young people. They estimate that by, I believe, 2030, and we are not far away from there, we'll have 375 million young people who are looking for jobs. In essence, we are saying by the year 2030, we'll have young people between the ages of 14 and 24 in the region of somewhere around 365 million young people. So if you're talking about unemployment today, you have not seen anything yet in another 5-10 years.
Wow.
What are the effects? Obviously, number one is, what does it do to self-image, to self-worth, to self-importance? The moment a young person will not afford to show up in the social places that peers show up. And we were shocked. When we started, we have had a project we have been calling Ingia Biz, where we have been focusing on creating decent work for 1,500 young people between the ages of 18 and 35. We were shocked because we thought dignified work has to be, meeting the minimum wage bill and those kinds of things. But when we went to seek the youth voice, we realized a young person describes dignified work from a perspective of, when my friends are showing up on Friday somewhere, I can also be able to show up and pay bills. Yeah. So self-worth, self-importance, self-image is one of the things that is very, very, very dented. If you hear the number of mental issues that we are now reporting, suicides, all those kinds of things, people taking their own lives, is from when somebody is pushed to a corner to feel that I no longer count, I'm no longer important. But secondly, you cannot take away the causal effect on substance, drug abuse, crime, and all those sorts of vices. You can't, there's a direct linkage in young people not being engaged. They say that an idle mind is usually the devil's workshop. So that saying, although proverbial, is also practically true. So there's a lot of, when I'm not engaged, I'm likely to start to fall prey to areas and pursuits that may not be very, 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 very decent.
Yeah.
But largely, we are denying ourselves a very, 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 very important resource, that's young people. So when young people are not engaged, solutions that would have come are not coming. Interventions that would have come from young people, young minds, are not coming.
Yeah.
So people have always said whether this youth bulge is a ticking time bomb or it's a very, 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 very important resource that we can reap what they have been calling demographic dividends.
Yeah.
But largely, all these things have a lot of effect on young people, because now the moment you are forced to feel like, and especially when now you add the social media bit into that mix, where I feel like I'm not styling up to that certain glamour that certain people are living, which may not always be true. The social pressure to want to be somebody else, to want to show yourself in an attempt to put your best foot forward. You want to show you two are somebody. So that's why we are getting into debt.
Yeah.
The Fulizas, the loans, and all these other things. So, but the list of effects is endless. That's just like to highlight a few that are, commonplace. Yeah.
That is nice. And even as we almost come to close, what will be your parting shot in this topic, youth unemployment, distress, maybe in less than a minute?
In less than a minute.
Yeah.
So for any young person out there, when we're talking about youth unemployment distress, The truth is, success is your ability to do what you can with what you have, right where you are.
Yes.
That is what I would say is likely to be the approach we need to take. The ability to do what you can with what you have, right where you are. If you keep doing that, you may not make skyrocket changes, but as long as you're able to put one foot in front of the other, eventually you'll get there.
So you are saying the ability to do what you can
With what you have. Right where you are.
Right where you are.
Yeah.
And that has been the Leader Show, courtesy of the Evangelical Alliance of Kenya in partnership with Catalid. I've been your host, Lugalia Kelvin. Until next time, thank you.